Before me is a long table vignetted by darkness. I seem to be standing near its center, noticing how the ends of the table extend out beyond my peripheral view, with the ceiling disappearing into the distance. The surrounding audio and scurried activity gradually begin to emerge as I become aware of people arriving and milling about, chatting and placing food on the table. Standing here, I realize I'm not quite sure how I ended up at this event, especially as I comprehend that before me is a sort of pedagogical potluck. Since I've neither perceived myself to be an educator nor an academic, I'm surprised by this realization. Pedagogy is the method and practice of teaching, and I'm a designer. How did I end up here? Nonetheless, as I look around, I see each platter represents an educator's pedagogy and uniquely reflects who they are, their experiences, perspectives, and personalities. I look down, and in my hands is also a warm plate of food, reflecting everything I've just described. But what pedagogical platter am I bringing to the table? And where did it come from? What ingredients have I been using? Like many practicing designers who find themselves teaching in the classroom, I was never formally educated on how to teach. My influences have emerged from experiences in working in the design industry, graduate studies, experimentation in the classroom, and seemingly unrelated subjects like anthropology, jazz, Lego bricks, children's books, spirituality, community development, and life coaching, to name a few. My thesis, titled At the Table, Scribbles and Stories on Teaching Design, is an autoethnographic exploration of my own graphic design pedagogy. Autoethnography is a research method using personal experiences, reflection, and narratives to understand and interpret both personal and cultural experience. As such, this thesis contains a collection of short stories, reflective essays, sketches, and accounts of personal experiences, experiments, and contemplations in relation to teaching graphic design. My thesis exploration is broken up into 3 parts. The first observes the influences informing my methods and philosophy prior to entering the classroom. The second reflects on the invaluable experience of my graduate studies. And the third returns to the context of my classroom and uncovers specific ingredients that show up in my teaching practice. These include holistic outcomes, playfulness, metaphor, and facilitation, all in support of a pedagogy revolving around the themes of experiential learning, imagination, and reflection. This autoethnographic thesis has offered scaffolding for my reflection on these ideas and experiences. Without it, much of this might float away, leaving me older but perhaps not much wiser. Allison James and Stephen D. Brookfield write about the importance of reflection after an experience. Quote, "It is what we do with that experience, how we convert its complex constituent elements into knowledge or understanding, that constitutes learning." End quote. And as I've reflected on my thesis experience, I noticed differing design orientations in academia and the design industry. The term orientation is defined as, quote, "the determination of the relative position of something or someone," end quote. In this case, I'm using it to refer to the position of what is favored in a design practice relative to each unique person. Each of these orientations could be found within any design practice to fluctuating degrees, so I'm acknowledging the distinction of varying value that could be allotted between them. It is not a matter of inclusion, but a matter of what the designer may value more or less. These orientations revolve around the mixture of elements included in a design practice, such as the brief, concept, content, process, research, materials, tools, object, results, system, and so on. For example, an object-oriented approach values the graphic form of a design, emphasizing its visual characteristics. It might concern itself with color, composition, hierarchy, textures, and other elements and principles of design, celebrating aesthetic and visual choices. A concept-oriented design approach considers the underlying conceptual meaning of the design. It might explore the designer's thought process and conceptual connections while evaluating its mindful execution and accessibility. A process-oriented approach to design observes the making of the design. It might inquire about the methods, story, and mindfulness as to how the final product was created, looking for a meaningful process. And a results-oriented design approach addresses the design's impact and effect. This preference might analyze and celebrate what the design is actually doing, such as solving a problem, communicating an emotion or idea, or influencing a response in people. There are other perspectives beyond these 4 highlighted orientations, but the intention of this acknowledgement is not about the orientations themselves, but rather the fact that these differing value systems exist. And this is where I feel tension. I have wrestled with which orientation might be a better choice in my own design practice. Is there a right or wrong? Are there appropriate or inappropriate situations for these to be used? But more importantly, in my own classroom, which of these should be valued, accepted, and celebrated and emphasized to the designers of tomorrow? Rather than settling on a single orientation, I've taken a step back from the pushing and pulling of these perspectives and looked for underlying threads. Emerging from my reflection, I realized I had been centering my practice on two specific themes: mindfulness and intentionality. Ellen J. Langer, a professor of psychology at Harvard University and the noted mother of mindfulness, defines mindfulness as, quote, the process of drawing novel distinctions, end quote, and suggests it can increase meaningfulness, retention, and interest in a subject. This practice, she points out further, also includes, quote, a greater sensitivity to one's environment, more openness to new information, the creation of new categories for structuring perception, and enhanced awareness of multiple perspectives and problem solving, end quote. Each of these items could be distinguished as significant benefits to the processes, practice, and learning of graphic design in cultivating curiosity, becoming more aware within observational and ethnographic research modes, and growth in ideation and imagination. As mindfulness could be associated with awareness, intentionality could be associated with action. In light of this, I desire for my students to grow not only in their awareness, but also in their decision-making process, further understanding what and why they do what they do. If graphic design is indeed, quote, visual form and content synthesized or destabilized in a mindful way, end quote, as defined by designer, educator, and author Ian Lynham, I propose I am using the process of design to teach the practice of it. Each of these ingredients discussed and explored throughout my thesis are a variation of form and content I design with while teaching. I'm choosing to synthesize the content of mindfulness and intentionality with the form of designed learning experiences in order to cultivate a learning environment where students not only grow in application, but awareness as well. Returning to the table, smells of freshly cooked food waft back into my nose, bringing me out of the depths of my thoughts. After 2 years of focused learning experiences, experimentation, and deep reflection, I returned to the pedagogical potluck, observing the table spread out before me. These words, experiences, and reflections documented in this thesis are what I hold freshly made, warm within my hands, my contribution to this meal. I set down my plate, leaving it on the table for others to taste, and turned to invite all of you to join me at the table. My thesis exhibition centers around a similar table expressed in my metaphor. Due to constraints, it holds a limited amount of seats, though in theory, all are invited. And in the expression of social distancing, the table remains empty, waiting for interaction. Ideally, we would all be sitting around this table in College Hall in Vermont, and as if we were, I would share the following. The dish you are bringing to this potluck sits directly in front of you, representing your teaching practice as a design educator. If you are not currently nor interested in design education, consider this as an exploration of your design practice. Your plate may seem empty now, but you have brought all of the ingredients with you, carrying them in your personality, experiences, values, and other areas of influence. This experiential potluck has been designed to encourage the discovery and exchange of the ingredients informing your teaching practice. Included on the table are question cards and thinking tools. The question cards explore 5 categories representing areas influencing your design practice, as well as questions to inspire further investigation. The thinking tools are playful objects chosen to offer structure to your reflection. To begin, choose a partner or form a group and review the menus provided in front of you, outlining the categories and process of the experience. And as you do, consider the words of educator Parker Palmer, who writes, quote, "We teach who we are," end quote. He goes on to suggest good teaching requires self-knowledge, and in this self-knowledge, quote, "Good teachers possess a capacity for connectedness. They are able to weave a complex web of connections among themselves, their subjects, and their students so that students can learn to weave a world for themselves," end quote. In an exploration of your own interconnectedness within your teaching practice, would you join me at the table? And in doing so, can I try some of that? It looks delicious.